there are people who I've seen in the comment section of my videos and in the comment section of other people's videos who are claiming that Dillian Whyte is the victim of weaponized drug testing. Now, by weaponized drug testing, they mean that either Dillian Whyte hasn't taken anything at all and he's completely innocent, but somebody interfered with his sample or maybe spiked him somehow so that he'd come out with a positive test, or both he and AJ are on stuff, but because AJ is the cash cow, somehow he's got connections inside VADA or whichever other drug testing agency, UCAD, and they turn the other cheek. They look the other way and make sure that AJ's dirty tests come out clean. But when they want to target somebody who's also using, they make sure that they actually get popped for what they're taking. So this is the concept of weaponized drug testing. And there are people claiming that this is what's happened to Dillian Whyte here with this Anthony Joshua situation. Now, they were saying this prior to the press conference that happened yesterday, where Derek Chisora said that he spoke to Dillian Whyte on the phone, and he said that Dillian Whyte told him that Eddie Hearn was behind his positive test. I don't know whether Derek Chisora was being serious or that he was joking around. Sometimes it's difficult to tell with him, because he will switch from being serious to joking around seamlessly, and he'll do it with a straight face. So I'm not telling you one way or the other. But as I say, there were people saying that Dillian Whyte was a victim of weaponized PED testing prior to that press conference. But since Derek Chisora came out with that, that's obviously added more fuel to their fire. And of course, what David Hay said a few days ago. He claimed that he spoke to Chisora, about a week before the Dillian Whyte failed test, and Chisora told him that Dillian Whyte was going to fail a test. So obviously that's added more fuel to their fire. And when Derek Chisora was quizzed about David Hay's claims, he didn't give a satisfactory answer, at least not to me, because at first he was making out as though he just guessed that Dillian Whyte was going to fail a test. And then he tried to play it off and say, David Hay, he's a salesman, he likes to say things. That wasn't a conclusive answer as far as I'm concerned. It was vague from Derek Chisora, which obviously raises more questions. Now, I'm not here telling you what's going on in this situation one way or the other. You guys can decide for yourselves. At the end of the day, I'm not an insider in the situation, but I want to tell you a couple things. As far as weaponized drug testing, boxing is a sport, we all know, that has always had a large criminal element in it. It certainly was like that back in the 1800s, going through to the early 20th century, and so on, with the mob in America. But even today, there's still quite a heavy criminal presence in boxing. We know the organization that was behind MTK. There are many criminal organizations in the United States that are involved in boxing, certainly in Mexico, certainly in Russia. Very serious criminal organizations involved in boxing and combat sports out there. And not just combat sports, they're involved in all aspects of society. All types of different businesses and industries, legitimate industries and what have you. So these criminal groups will usually, but not always, bring their criminal ways into the legitimate world, into sports like boxing, and they'll start behaving in the world of boxing the way they behave in their criminal endeavors. So I've got no doubt that weaponized drug testing is something that has happened, but has it gone on here with Dillian Whyte and Eddie Hearn? Going back to what Derek Chisora said at the press conference, that he claims he had a conversation with Dillian Whyte and Dillian Whyte is blaming it on Hearn, his failed test. Dillian Whyte has apparently, and this is something I'll do a separate video about, persuaded Fabio Wardley, or somehow, some way, made it so that the purse bid for the Wardley-Adelaide fight didn't go ahead. This is the inference anyway. I'm not saying Dillian Whyte has definitely done that, but this is the inference because, of course, Richard Riakporhe pulled out of the purse bid for the Jay Opetaia fight, and Eddie Hearn was quick to slate and slam Ben Shalom, inferring that he was behind that. No sooner had Eddie Hearn said that, it comes out that Fabio Wardley, a fighter who fights on his shows, he's not signed to any kind of long-term promotional deal with Eddie Hearn, but he fights on Eddie Hearn shows. We all know this. Eddie Hearn said he spoke to Fabio Wardley, didn't say exactly what Wardley told him, but he alluded to the issues with Dillian Whyte's drug test and seemed to suggest that that is part of the reason that Fabio Wardley decided not to go through the purse bid. But instead, Fabio Wardley's apparently trying to do a deal with David Adelaide and his team. Now, the easiest way to get that fight done would have been to go to a purse bid. But sometimes teams do, it's relatively rare, but I've heard of it happening, get together and ask for an extension of the negotiation period. Because typically, certainly with the world sanctioning bodies, you'll get a 30-day period to negotiate. And if you can't come to terms, it'll go to a purse bid. Right? The sanctioning body will order the purse bid. But occasionally, the two teams will agree that they want an extension on the negotiating period. So they'll push the purse bid back. Now, in this case, with Fabio Wardley and David Adelaide, it's the British Boxing Board of Control. So have they approached the British Boxing Board of Control and asked them to delay the purse bid so they can try and get a deal done? I don't know. But the speculation is that because Dillian Whyte apparently, supposedly, allegedly, isn't happy with Eddie Hearn, that is why he has instructed Wardley or advised Wardley to try and do a deal with Queensberry so that the Wardley-Adelaide fight won't happen on an Eddie Hearn show. So you can see there's layers and layers and layers of this story right now. And yeah, with regards to the weaponized PED testing, Dillian Whyte, to my recollection, has never been a guy that will readily accept responsibility for bad things that happened to him in his boxing career. When he lost to Tyson Fury, he came out with a whole heap of excuses, and it was all absolute nonsense. First of all, he said that Fury shoved him like it was some type of wrestling move, like he shoved him over so hard it would have knocked over an elephant. That was absolute rubbish. We all saw the tiny amount of pressure that Tyson Fury put on Dillian Whyte, this massive shove that Dillian Whyte claimed it to be. No, it was a tiny little shove. And Dillian Whyte was out on his feet after taking an uppercut. He went down. Then Dillian Whyte claimed that he hit his head on the canvas, and that's what left him so woozy. So he was making out as though he wouldn't have gone down unless he was shoved, and he wouldn't have been so badly hurt if he hadn't hit his head on the canvas. And of course, the instant replay showed that he didn't hit his head on the canvas. So when that was exposed, Dillian Whyte switched it up again and said that he hurt his ankle when he got up, or during the fall or something. He managed to hurt his ankle, and that was the reason why I guess he was wobbly when he got up. We all know that's total nonsense. He was out of it. And then he started complaining about how he should have been allowed more time to recover. The fight shouldn't have been waved off. It was right before the bell, so on and so forth. And he made out as though there was some type of agenda against him, that the powers that be wanted to help Tyson Fury. And, Dillian Whyte has rightly criticized Deontay Wilder over the years for some of the delusional nonsense that Wilder has come out with. But truth be told, Dillian Whyte was going down that same road, or a similar road, maybe not as extreme as Wilder, but he was going down a similar road after the Tyson Fury fight, talking absolute nonsense. He's a guy, at least to my recollection, who doesn't like taking responsibility for anything that happens to him in his career. He wants to find someone else to blame. I certainly consider that with regards to this PED situation, because when people are claiming that he's the victim of weaponized PED testing, Dillian Whyte, if he was guilty, would love that. He would love people to be putting that story out there, because then he gets to blame somebody else. If Dillian Whyte isn't guilty, if he's, innocent, then he would still like it, because he'd be angry. He'd want answers. He'd want to know what's going on. He'd start getting paranoid and thinking, well, Hearn has plotted against me and they've done this somehow, and so on and so forth. And of course, at the end of the day, Dillian Whyte does have history when it comes to tested positive for PEDs. This is not the first time. This is the third time. First time it happened to him, okay, over-the-counter supplement. It had an ingredient that had been recently banned. But the second time, we never got details about what happened there. And as I mentioned in the previous video, the psychology of a drug cheat is to think, believe, and say that everybody else is taking PEDs as well. So when I take it, it's okay. It's not really cheating. I'm actually just getting myself on a level playing field. And we know that Dillian Whyte in the past has accused Anthony Joshua of having a TUE for testosterone. Given that it was last chance saloon for Dillian Whyte, did he roll the dice and think, you know what, I need some extra help trying to beat Anthony Joshua? Let's try and beat the testing. Maybe he's beat the testing before. I don't know. I'm throwing a hypothetical out here. And since he's been rumbled, what's he going to do? Start pointing the finger at other people, or put his hands up and say, oh yeah, you got me? What do you guys think he would do based upon what you know of his character? So I just wanted to lay that out there. Yes, there are corrupt things that happen in boxing. Are the Hearns that bad that they would do something like that? I know there are people who point to the fact that Barry Hearn appeared on that list, right? I won't name the individual. Let's just call him Jeff. And that Barry Hearn allegedly was on Jeff's list. And they use that as evidence in their view that the Hearns are not as legit as people might think. And therefore, if they're rubbing shoulders with those type of people, then it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they're involved in weaponized PED testing. Again, I'm just laying out what people are saying, but I'm also laying out my thoughts with regards to Dillian Whyte, his character, the way he's behaved in the past. I don't necessarily trust Dillian Whyte to be fair, to be completely rational all the time, to be accountable for things that happen in his career and in his life. He is the kind of guy, from what I've seen, that likes to pass the buck and put the blame elsewhere. The last thing I will say is, it is curious that Derek Chisora, according to David Hay, knew a week before Eddie Hearn did that Dillian Whyte had either failed a test or was going to fail a test. That's a very curious thing. And as I said earlier on, I was not satisfied with the answer that Derek Chisora gave. Chisora got up there in the press conference, as he often does, and tried to embarrass Eddie Hearn. It was all very funny. I was laughing throughout. And, he tries to be this guy who's totally open and honest, and he doesn't want anyone to hide anything. And if there's like a subtext going on during a press conference, Derek Chisora wants to cut through the subtext, right? And just expose it all and bring it all to the surface. But yet when he was put on the spot with regards to David Hay's comments, all of a sudden it was subtext with Derek Chisora. He weren't so open then. He looked like he was scrambling around trying to think his way out of it, to me. So that right there is concerning, that David Hay may have been told by Derek Chisora at least a week prior that Dillian Whyte had either failed a test or was going to fail a test. How would he know that if what Eddie Hearn says is true? Because Eddie Hearn says he only found out last Saturday. And I think he said, correct me if I'm wrong, that the test was only a couple days before he found out. Meaning, again, Derek Chisora, if what David Hay says is true, would have known that Dillian Whyte was going to fail a test before the test happened. But then again, you've got people like Dan Rayfield who say that Dillian Whyte failed multiple tests. So maybe there was a test that Eddie Hearn wasn't aware of that he failed. And then later on, there was another test that he failed that Eddie Hearn became aware of on the Saturday. So I don't know. I'm just laying out the theories of certain people and the thoughts of myself. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Are you sick and tired of the mainstream mindset? Does the dogmatic conformity and pathological ignorance have you tearing your hair out in frustration? Then don't be alone. Come and join our brotherhood on Patreon. We stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. You'll gain access to my weekly topical podcast, where we take more deep dives than Jacques Cousteau on an endless variety of subjects. There's also videos, interviews, live Q&As, as well as a vast back catalogue of previous episodes, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen via the Patreon app or download in high-quality MP3. Connect with myself and hundreds of other members in our Element chat group. There's no contract, no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a Mickey D's McMuffin. Just head to my Patreon page via the link below this video and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. I'll see you over there.